Everybody understands the fiction of Russian elections this year. It's obvious that democracy existed here only in the name elections, but nowhere else. However, if imagine the reality of perfectly fair Russian elections, the reality wouldn't change much. Indeed, the government do not need to falsify results anymore because most of the Russians approve of President Putin's job performance and his decisions about the war in Ukraine. The questions which bother here: how was it possible to make most of the people voluntarily participate in the war and risk their life? Probably the fact that Russia uses propaganda, it's not the new fact for any of us. But in the case of war, the information becomes the most powerful weapon. That is why it is so important to understand now what exactly motivates people to engage into attacking the other country. In this and few other videos, we will try to answer the following questions. How exactly propaganda in Russia is formed, who is controlling it, and who is coordinating it? What are distinctive features which make Russian propaganda so powerful and distinct from other types of propaganda? Where does it take roots from? And why so many Russians believe in it? To understand this phenomenon better, let's delve into the vacuum in which typical Russian citizen lives. Our today's arsenal includes the official government communications. It includes Kremlin or ministry statements or quotes by Russian officials. It helps to set the general tune of the program. The second one is the control of media. It includes state-owned TV channels as well as bought or speculated channels. Maybe surprisingly, but TV still plays the biggest role in Russians' life. Who controls it? Controls everything. The next one is history speculations. While all people are stuck on thinking about Roman Empire, Russians still think that they live in Russian Empire. The recipe is simple. Just make sure that in history narrative there is no other nation in the Eastern Europe but Russians, and prescribe each victory to glory Russians. And be ready to meet the newest trend: internet trolling. You want to reach out Gen Z and to promote the market of freelance jobs? Buy 108,000 people who will be ready to post 1,000 comments per day on social media. The reason to do it? The influence on youngsters. But you may wonder how exactly these instruments are used. Does Putin himself sits every evening and creating the program list for tomorrow, what will be shown on the TV and etc.? Not really. Let's start with the top of the iceberg: Kremlin. And of course, its leader. As I said, the government influencing the tune of the future propaganda melody through publishing legislations or governmental statements. In case of Putin, it's a bit difficult to understand for sure which exactly infection has attacked his mind, but according to everything and even recently published interview with him, this guy is actually believing everything he is saying. Example of how official statements can be used to create the narrative can be Russian military doctrine, and it changes after annexion of Crimea in 2014. The new doctrine now recognizes as military danger such things as NATO, territorial claims against Russian Federation and its allies, and any interruption into internal affairs of Russian Federation. The next layer is presidential administration and its representatives. I will skip the topic about how exactly this structure was formed. Let's better concentrate on the hierarchy. Be ready to meet one of the greatest controllers of Russian TV channels, Alexei Gromov, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Presidential Administration of Russia. Every week he, on behalf of the administration, holds a meeting with representatives of 3 major TV channels in Russia: the First Channel, NTV and Россия. The Director General or his deputy, on the behalf of all these 3 channels, every week attends these meetings. Then, 5 days per week, a state-controlled consultancy issues a more detailed list of topics. Gromov also regularly communicates with TV channels by phone, discussing which topic to add or to dismiss in this content. For example, now the list contains 6 to 10 topics per day, which supplements the Ministry of Defense war updates. Topics fall into 4 broad categories: economic, jubilatory, sentimental, and ironic. Economic stories should show that Western sanctions have made life harder in Europe than in Russia. People in Britain can't afford the heat. Germans could be forced to ride bikes because gas prices are so raised up. Stock markets are falling and Western Europe may be facing a food crisis. Revelatory topics focus on misinformation and disinformation in the West. For example, it may include stories about Ukrainian refugees exposing their true criminal selves by shoplifting in Western European country. Sentimental stories are focusing on the connection between Russian in Russia and Russian in Ukraine, in eastern part of Ukraine. For example, a couple getting married in newly liberated Bryansk, or doctors in Russia provide some special treatment and medical care for children injured in Ukraine. Finally, ironic stories are focused on mocking Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky or, for example, Joe Biden's mental decline. Funny that sometimes channels are so lazy to change the original text of official statements that it's sometimes possible to see how different broadcasting channels duplicate themselves and using the same phrases. To another key figure belongs an associate of President Putin, Yuri Kovalchuk. He has control over every single message in the media. Yuri Kovalchuk owns controlling shareholdings in First Channel and STS TV, as well as majority shareholdings in NTV, REN-TV, Fifth Channel, also Izvestia and Live News. In addition to this, Kovalchuk owns the Video International company, which produces advertisement for most of the channels. One of the mechanisms of media control is allocating the advertisement budgets of the state-owned companies to the media. And there is only one condition attached: no negative sentence about state-owned companies. State-owned companies pay the media not only for advertisements, but also for the placement of the articles which never identified as an advertisement. Control over the print media is implemented through the support of Vyacheslav Volodin, first deputy chief of staff of the presidential administration of Russia. Volodin takes part in creation of press materials for certain media campaigns. Another acquaintance of President Putin, Arkady Rotenberg. He influences the operations of the First Channel. He owns the company Krasny Kvadrat, which produces programs for this channel. News which are directly related to President Putin's performance are controlled by the press attaché of the President of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Peskov. All major TV channels have their superstars, who gain their popularity and build their careers over professionally telling the fairy tales. For the people whose brain finally overcomes the first stages of development and started to seek for the logical arguments, loyal political scientists were put into the game. They correctly interpret the events in Russia and abroad to the population. The political scientists who regularly communicate with presidential administration include Sergei Markov, Dmitry Orlov, Vyacheslav Nikonov, Sergei Kurgindyan, Mikhail Leontiev and Alexei Pushkov. The next stage in the hierarchy is editors. For example, that's an opinion of Evgeny Revenko, a deputy editor of the state television and also broadcasting company. It is a simple logical chain. We are state television. Our state is a presidential republic. Hence, we do not criticize the president. One of his former colleagues described the editing process under the control of Evgeny Revenko. You are writing your copy in a proprietary program, and my bosses, Revenko and the person who was between me and him, have it open on their screens. The phone is ringing constantly. Change this, drop that. Here is also opinion of another news writer. I realize now that I'm an ideal state television worker. I'm apolitical, uninterested in politics at all. That is the kind of citizen this regime cultivates. The next layer is drone journalists. Nowadays, most of the content is produced not by big editors or writers or even ministries, but for people who have very small jobs. They just rewrite the copy which comes from the defense ministry and write voiceover on the silent video which comes from governmental agencies. Other current and former employees describe state television and media as a military. You have a few generals, and you are a simple soldier who never questions their orders. Okay, you might notice that all of the media have the common goal to please the President Putin. But what about the president himself? Funny to say, but the Russian state and its propaganda machine has a feedback loop. Putin watches his own television and sometimes can quote some messages from it. The television catches this moment and further emphasizes the narrative. And these messages can originate everywhere all over this loop. For example, on the February 2019, Maria Baranova, a former opposition activist, writes a post on her personal Telegram channel. She was arguing that NATO and its allies should be denazified. Her supervisor reads this message, praises her and asks her to write more messages like that. 12 days later, President Putin announces the full-scale invasion to Ukraine and calls its goal as demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. I pulled it out of my ass for that post, and then when they were scraping together verbiage for Putin's speech, they picked it up. The system works because it has an audience of one, Putin, and whatever satisfies him lives further. This was the first video on the topic of propaganda in Russia. Today we were talking about the hierarchy of propaganda and how the whole system is working and how messages are created. But I will make much more videos in the future. Please support me with like and your comment, and maybe you have some wishes or critique or recommendations. I would take it into account for my future videos. Have a nice day, bye bye, and see you!